The Exorcist, starring the bewitching 14-year-old Linda Blair, may be the most terrifying movie ever produced. The Exorcist wasn't just a film. It was a mind-bending, gut-wrenching experience.
I saw someone get up from a front row, a younger woman, and start walking slowly up the aisle. She was saying, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus."
Blair, who played a terrified young girl in the clutches of the devil, became an overnight star. Unfortunately, her career also seemed possessed, and she was never able to shake her most famous role.
It just kind of haunted her. People would always do their silly, innuendos, their silly jokes.
In the next hour, Linda Blair will relive her mesmerizing star-crossed life. We will revisit the set of The Exorcist, a set seemingly cursed by dark forces.
I'm screaming and crying, and that's, of course, the footage I use.
We will experience her failed rock and roll romances.
I certainly remember having my share of it, but I seem to remember she had the lion's share of the tears.
Her devastating drug bust.
It was just the arrest ruined my career. Absolutely brought it to a halt. Hollywood didn't want anything to do with me.
And her descent into B-movie hell.
She did go into a direction into the B films. She had to eat, she had to pay the bills.
And finally, Linda will talk about her quest for an exorcist-free identity.
There's nowhere that I can go in life that people will not ask me about The Exorcist. I've had to accept that responsibility.
This is the tale of a woman forever chained to one role. A woman who's been labeled a felon and a failure, but also a survivor. This is the story of Linda Blair, the true Hollywood story.
Her life's ambition was to be a star.
Could never recover from the public scandal.
Linda Denise Blair was born on January 22, 1959 in St. Louis, Missouri, the third child of James and Eleanor Blair. When Linda turned 2, James Blair took a job as director of marketing for This Week magazine in New York City. The Blairs packed the family up and moved to suburban Westport, Connecticut. Linda's father, James Blair.
It was a nice community. Most of every one of us were heavily mortgaged. There were 35 families, and everybody had at least 2 to 4 kids in every family.
James was consumed by his work, and when he wasn't working, he was commuting. The pay was good, but quality time with his family was limited. Eleanor spent her days doting on Linda, while brother Jimmy and sister Debbie attended school. In 1962, Eleanor stumbled across an advertisement placed by an agency in New York looking for child models. Although Linda was barely out of diapers, her mother decided to give it a shot. Linda Blair.
The children had to have a vivacious personality, and we all had that. And she said there was just something that sort of drew her into thinking, my kids could do that.
Eleanor saw modeling as an opportunity to build a nest egg for her children's future. The agency submitted all of the Blair kids for modeling jobs, but the clients always picked 4-year-old Linda. Linda appeared in catalog layouts including J.C. Penney's and Sears. When she was 5, Linda landed her first national television commercial for the Newsoft Corporation.
The first commercial I did was fabric softener, which was in like a lion, out like a lamb, and I had to learn how to jump rope.
All week long, the whole family was down in the basement teaching her how to skip rope.
So every day, did she learn? And finally, yay, she learned how to jump rope.
Eleanor became more than just a mother to Linda.
My mother was the one that would get the phone calls, and she was the chauffeur, she was the cook, she was the everything, and I never heard no from her.
Linda relied on her mother to manage her career, but rarely confided in Eleanor about personal matters. Instead, Linda turned to her father.
Well, my father, I always felt like I could count on him, I could talk to him. We talked about a lot of personal things that I didn't talk about with my mother. My mother was very guarded in many ways.
The tendency of both parents to dote on Linda bothered the other children. Childhood friend Dale Sachs.
They had a little sister that was a star, that was catered to and taken care of with good reason.
They were jealous. There's no doubt about it, although they didn't come out and say so. but they learned to get along with it after a while. But it was tough for them because she was #1 in the house.
Linda's life was extremely regimented.
She would be picked up after school by her mom, and they'd go drive into New York, and she'd do her modeling, her little bit for a couple of hours every afternoon, and come home and start the next day at school at 8:30 in the morning.
The hard work paid off for Linda.
One commercial led to another. One producer would find out about her and would request her, and so she just, you know, she was living on top of the world. She was the top young model in New York City.
As Linda's career blossomed, her parents' marriage began to fall apart.
When I was 7 years old, that's when the arguing started and all of the ugly words that fly between people that don't get along. And it hurt me very bad. I was freaked out completely.
Despite the fights, Eleanor and James decided to keep the family together for financial reasons. Eleanor Blair was consumed by Linda's career.
Her mom did a wonderful job as her manager, and, you know, I don't think Mrs. Blair made all the right decisions either.
Eleanor had little time for the rest of the family. Meanwhile, the money Linda generated gave her the purchasing power to buy whatever she desired.
When I was probably around 8, I wanted my own pony, and my parents made me save my money. So when I was 10, I got to buy my first pony.
Linda worked steadily between 1969 to 71, often cast in roles meant for younger girls. So at age 12, when puberty hit, directors had to find a creative way to make Linda look younger.
They were starting to wrap my breasts with cellophane. Now you try doing winter coats in the summer with cellophane wrapped around your body. You're sweating like you can't believe.
Linda rebelled.
And she hated it. She hated it, and it was uncomfortable. And she understood it, but she didn't understand it.
So I said to my mom, finally one day, I said, I don't want to do this anymore.
In 1971, with more than 75 commercials and hundreds of catalog layouts under her belt, 12-year-old Linda decided to say goodbye to her acting and modeling career for good. Then, 2 weeks later, Linda's agent received a call.
She said, oh, we got an interview for a movie.
When the True Hollywood story continues, a filmmaker's vision of the devil turns Linda's world upside down.
So the pea soup was really getting to me, really, really getting to me.
By the time she was 12, Linda Blair appeared in 75 commercials and hundreds of clothing ads. But life at home was miserable. Linda's siblings resented her success, and her mother and father were growing further apart. Linda decided to take an early retirement from showbiz. Then she received an offer she couldn't refuse.
Both of us did our best to say, well, okay, this was going to be a great opportunity for her.
In 1971, Warner Brothers started pre-production on The Exorcist. The screenplay was based on the best-selling novel by William Peter Blatty. Warner Brothers paid Blatty $3.5 million for the rights to his terrifying book about a 12-year-old girl possessed by the devil. The author was not convinced that a child actor could pull off the demanding role.
Well, we'll have to use a midget. I thought it was impossible. You know, the effects involved, oh, so many things, so many of the internalized problems of the characters.
Despite his skepticism, Blatty and Academy Award-winning director William Friedkin began a nationwide search for the perfect girl to play the part of Reagan.
We did not want a Hollywood child. We wanted a real child, the girl next door of your dreams. And we finally got it down to 3.
Linda Blair was one of the 3. Linda recalls auditioning for the casting director in New York City.
I went in and they handed me a sheet of paper, had like a paragraph on it. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading, I'm in the office, I'm like this. I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna say this?
On the ride home with her mother, Linda kept quiet about the lines she read during the audition.
I got in the car and I thought, how do I tell my mother? What do I, and I thought, I can't, so I never did.
But Linda couldn't keep her mother in the dark for long. The writer and the director asked Eleanor and Linda to read The Exorcist. Eleanor realized the true intensity of the role and told the director William Friedkin what she expected.
Knowing Mom the way she was, she may have just let it be said, I'll let you do what you need to do, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get in the way, but don't plan to do anything that's going to hurt her. I mean, Mom wasn't, she wasn't stupid.
After 4 months of interviews and screen tests, Friedkin and Blatty selected Linda to take on the arduous role.
She projected the stability and the wholesomeness and the optimism and the normalcy that we wanted for this girl. A certain spirit of generosity radiated from her.
Principal photography began in Washington, D.C. in August of 1972. Academy Award-winning actress Ellen Burstyn played Linda's mother. From the beginning, the shoot was tense. Screenwriter William Blatty struggled to write dialogue for the demon child.
I do recall that Billy came to me one day in my office and said, Bill, we need some obscenities. What do you mean? We need them for Linda as the demon in the exorcism scene. We're a little short of time. We need some real vituperation here. I mean, well, how bad do you want it? The worst.
12-year-old Linda Blair was required to spout obscenities. But that wasn't the only aspect of production that made the shoot difficult for the young actress. Friedkin insisted on sub-zero temperatures on the set during the possession scenes to keep the actors on edge.
The set was always 0 degrees. And it was actually below 0 in the morning. By the time that they lit the set, it would be about 0 degrees to work in. 17 above was too hot. We had to turn the fans back on.
At the climax of the movie, the script called for Linda's character to spit up green vomit, an effect created with a common food product.
Pea soup was really getting to me. After a while, after a couple months of this stuff, I just started getting really more withdrawn.
Then, the first of several inexplicable accidents began to plague the production. First, an electrical fire shut down the set for 6 weeks. Next, actor Jack McGowan died just 2 weeks after he completed his scenes. And Ellen Burstyn injured her back, performing a stunt during one of the possession sequences. After a year and a half of exhausting conditions, the film officially wrapped in the fall of '73, and a tired Linda returned home.
I went back to what that so-called normal life was. Went back to Connecticut, back to my friends. Basically was preparing for, I guess, 9th grade.
Friedkin and Blatty returned to California, hired 4 editing teams, and began to assemble The Exorcist, while Warner Brothers prepared for a holiday release. When the E! True Hollywood story continues, the world reacts to Linda's performance.
I knew my life had changed. I didn't know why and how.
In 1973, Linda Blair survived the grueling Exorcist shoot and disappeared back into suburbia. The 14-year-old actress was blissfully unaware of her impending stardom and the heightened expectations that came with fame.
People, all of a sudden, they'd see me. They would just stop in their tracks.
The time between Linda's return to Westport, Connecticut, and the release of The Exorcist could be called the calm before the storm. Linda attended high school and spent her weekends competing in equestrian competitions.
She had about 4 horses. She started with a small pony and worked with the agricultural group. And then she got into jumping. Then she won. At the time of The Exorcist, she was ready to go to the big horse show in New York City. She was right on the edge of competing with the best people in the country.
On December 26, 1973, The Exorcist premiered in New York City. Linda attended the event with her close friends and family. A tense William P. Blatty was also in the audience.
I saw someone get up from a front row, a younger woman, and start walking slowly up the aisle with her hand to her head. And when she got close enough for me to hear, I heard what she was saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I thought, oh God, we're dead. If this is a critic, we are absolutely dead.
But Blatty didn't need to worry. For her part, Linda knew it was a hit as soon as the credits rolled.
I was shocked that that's what we were making. And I knew right there and then, when the film was over and everyone gave me a standing ovation and I started crying, I knew my life had changed. I didn't know why and how.
Amen.
God, defender of his humans. Look down in pity.
You killed your mother.
Your servant.
You left her alone to die.
Shut
up! I'll never forgive you. Bastard! Oh!
I command you, by the judge of the living and the dead, to depart from the servant of God. It's the power. Holy water. It's the power of Christ that compels you. The power of Christ. The power of Christ.
The Exorcist terrified audiences. Word of mouth about the frightening new movie spread across the country. The film spawned an avalanche of publicity. Suddenly, everyone seemed to be discussing the devil and supernatural possession. The film was so convincing that fact and fiction began to blur in the public's imagination.
The only thing anybody can write is how I must be having mental problems. There's something wrong with me. That I was in a mental institute.
To combat the rumors and grab some extra publicity, Warner Brothers tossed a big celebration for Linda's 15th birthday on January 22, 1974. The cast and crew of The Exorcist joined the young guest of honor.
They brought me to California and threw an incredible party here at Chasen's. And everyone, they had Max there, Max von Sydow and Ellen Burstyn and Billy Friedkin and Blatty, and everybody was there, along with every member of the press. It was supposed to be for me, and everyone was pretty cool, but it just gave Warner Brothers the ability to let people be around me to see that I was somewhat normal.
But the crowd at Chasen's, along with everyone else in the country, soon learned the Exorcist craze was just beginning.
I had no clue as to what was coming. But when it happened, when I think Billy and I knew, when on the same night, Walter Cronkite did 12 minutes on the evening news, NBC and ABC, all with shots of the marquee and lines around the block.
As a gimmick, some theater owners started handing out air sickness bags for patrons with weak stomachs.
People were seeing the film and they were just blown away by it. It's a psychological film. It's a film that makes you think. It's not just, you know, some people say it's a horror film, some people say it's not.
The Exorcist raked in more than $1.8 million a week in only 25 theaters and grossed nearly $8.5 million during the first month of the run, a record-shattering total in the early 70s. Executives at Warner Brothers predicted The Exorcist would become their top-grossing movie of all time. But the success of the film affected the young star's personal life.
People, all of a sudden, they'd see me. They would just stop in their tracks. And what I really felt for a long time is people could not separate the two. I was this little girl that was possessed, so maybe I was still possessed.
A few months after The Exorcist was released, 15-year-old Linda Blair, along with other cast and crew, started receiving death threats from an unknown source. Linda's father, James Blair.
We got a telephone call from the author saying that there was a threat on all of their lives. Well, both Eleanor and I were almost paralyzed. We didn't know, you know, I mean, that's something that scared the living bejesus out of us.
Warner Brothers paid to protect the studio's young star.
Warner Brothers hired the police to live at our house for 6 months, and that was very strange. The police would basically spend from 6 p.m. until like 6 a.m. The phones were all tapped, and they could never catch this guy.
The person behind the death threats was never identified, and the dangers slowly faded away. But in the aftermath of the Exorcist phenomenon, Linda once again considered giving up her acting career. When the E! True Hollywood story continues, Linda is overexposed.
I'm 15. I am shy, very shy. And so there's a lot of men, and I'm in the shower, and it was hard for me.
And later.
And I'd seen the movie, Exorcist, so it was very interesting to me to have that kind of attention from someone who had so much notoriety then. And we just clicked.
The Exorcist made Linda Blair a celebrity, but Linda quickly learned about the downside of fame. The press questioned her sanity, and a lunatic made death threats. Linda began to believe that the film ruined her life.
So there was a lot of people that were just plain afraid of me.
In the winter of 1974, 15-year-old Linda Blair was on the verge of ending her acting career. Then she was nominated for a string of awards, including Best Supporting Actress for the People's Choice, the Golden Globe, and the Academy Awards. Linda won a People's Choice and a Golden Globe.
When it came time, you know, and they're announcing it, when they said my name, I'm in a state of shock.
With the Golden Globe securely in her hands, Linda anxiously waited for the Academy Award ceremonies. But a controversy threatened her chances. Linda Blair's stunt double, Eileen Dietz, claimed she played the demon in the possession scenes.
It started really coming out about Eileen Dietz being the double. They had come forward when the movie had a lot of success and said, wait a minute, we did all of that. Linda didn't do it.
Exorcist writer William Blatty said the stunt double's contribution was negligible.
She's on the screen for about 57 seconds of the film.
The Oscar went to another young actress, Tatum O'Neal, for her role in Paper Moon. Linda didn't win the big prize, but the publicity surrounding her nomination boosted her career.
It changes your structure in the system, you know, where you are and your value.
The powerful William Morris Talent Agency signed on to represent her. Linda immediately landed a role alongside Charlton Heston in the feature film Airport 75. The movie was an enormous hit, but Blair's next role was much riskier. Linda's agents convinced Eleanor that her daughter should take the part of an imprisoned teenager in NBC's jailhouse drama, Born Innocent. It was the story of a chronic runaway, played by Blair, who is sent to a juvenile prison for girls. 15-year-old Linda had to perform a scene where she was viciously raped by fellow inmates.
You go through the whole rape process, you come out feeling real raped. And that didn't sit well with me at all. There's no one there for you. Once again, you just retreat.
The brutal images pushed the envelope for network TV.
And then it aired, and of course, it changed primetime television. Back then, that was something. You didn't show things like that.
After shooting was completed on Born Innocent, Linda's mom, Eleanor, returned home to Connecticut. Linda's older sister, Debbie, was sent to L.A. as a chaperone for her 15-year-old sister. But Linda started hanging out at Sunset Strip clubs, like the Roxy and the Rainbow.
Of course, everybody let me in. I could go anywhere I wanted. Was I underage? Absolutely. But everybody wanted me.
On one excursion, Linda went to the famous Whiskey A Go-Go to see teen idol Rick Springfield.
I was familiar with him only because of the teen magazines, Tiger Beat and the different things, and really I had no interest in Rick.
Springfield caught sight of Blair in the VIP seats.
His manager came up to me before the show and said, would you like to meet Rick? And I said, no. And they said, well, please come up and meet Rick. I felt obligated, so I went. And it was just love at first sight.
Rick Springfield.
And I'd seen the movie Exorcist, so it was very interesting to me to have that kind of attention from someone who had so much notoriety then. We just clicked.
Linda was 16. Rick was 24. Linda's father, James Blair, wasn't pleased.
I have to tell you that I'm a little old-fashioned. And so the first time I heard about the relationship between the two of them, I wasn't too happy about this. And I said to my wife, I said, what the heck's going on here?
Although Linda's father didn't approve of the relationship, he couldn't stop the romance. A few months after they met, Linda's rocker boyfriend spent Christmas with the Blairs in Connecticut.
He came to visit us Christmas, and it was a very funny event. We were used to sleeping in late, and Rick wanted to get up and raise heck, and so he would run up and down the hallway in our house.
I think I was so excited I tripped over the stairs and broke one of my toes.
The passion was intense, but after 18 months, the fire burned out.
The pressure of our business world became too much. The seclusion.
Friend Sue Fish.
It was a real tough breakup for her. She was very much in love with him. And for about 18 months, it was a shaky go for her. Every time she'd see him, she'd have a hard time.
The separation was difficult for them both, but Rick felt Linda endured most of the pain.
I certainly remember having my share of it, but I seem to remember she had the lion's share of the tears.
17-year-old Linda continued to work. She was offered yet another made-for-TV drama. Linda went from playing a rape victim to playing a drunk in Sarah T., Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic. Music producer and friend Rick Phillips.
I think being kind of pigeonholed the victim a lot early on has kind of wreaked a little bit of havoc with the choices she's given.
In 1977, Warner Brothers decided to make a sequel to The Exorcist called The Heretic. Linda Blair was once again asked to take on the role of a girl possessed by the devil.
None of us believed that you could do a part 2 to the film, so we said no. And they actually gave us a very good script, so I signed to do it.
Linda earned nearly $1 million for part 2, but the sequel didn't stand up to the original. The Heretic was a flop.
The only thing I could do is just show up at work and do my job.
While Linda worked in Hollywood, the relationship between her parents deteriorated. Although James and Eleanor Blair were still legally married, emotionally, the marriage had been over for years. Shortly after Linda's 18th birthday, her parents divorced. Linda drifted away from the family and took control of her career. For the first time in Linda's life, she started feeling her independence. When the True Hollywood story continues, independence comes with a price.
She was charged, along with 37 other people, in a conspiracy to distribute cocaine.
(1977) was a turbulent year for 18-year-old Linda Blair. After the breakup with singer Rick Springfield and the divorce of her parents, Blair set out on her own. Linda was determined to jumpstart her career, but fate intervened.
And I went down faster than the Titanic.
Linda had a special passion for musicians. While filming The Heretic, she formed a friendship with Dean Kilpatrick, the road manager for the southern rock band Lynyrd Skynyrd. But on October 21, 1977, Linda received some devastating news.
We get the phone call that Lynyrd Skynyrd's plane went down, and that I have just lost a whole lot of my best friends.
Linda flew to the funeral in Jacksonville, Florida. At the wake, she met a friend who was dating a member of the band who wasn't on board the doomed plane.
When I was in Florida at the funeral, she'd wanted me to go to buy some drugs.
Linda claims she resisted at first, but decided to go along because the drug suppliers were also dog breeders, and she was interested in purchasing a puppy. When Linda arrived at the dealer's home, according to newspaper reports, Blair purchased a 1/4 ounce of cocaine. Linda did not buy a dog. After the funeral, Linda returned to her home in Connecticut and continued to communicate with the dealers in Jacksonville about her promised pet. But court records charged Blair was conspiring to purchase more cocaine.
What we didn't know was that their phones were tapped, and they were part of a huge drug ring.
On December 20th, 1977, agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration confronted Linda at her home.
And he came up to the door and he said, "You Linda Blair?" And of course I wouldn't answer him. And he said, "You're under arrest."
Linda was taken into custody by DEA agents and the local Wilton, Connecticut police. District Attorney Gary Betts.
She was charged, along with 37 other people, in a conspiracy to distribute cocaine, along with one major dealer.
Linda claims she never intended to sell drugs, but she does admit she experimented.
I have always been very honest about the fact that I had definitely done cocaine.
The police claimed that Linda bought drugs in Florida and brought them to Connecticut to sell. But Linda insisted that she was only interested in some pedigree puppies.
I think that's basically a rumor, though there may have been something involved that he had dogs for sale.
After her arrest on the Florida indictment for conspiracy to buy or sell cocaine, the Wilton police searched Linda's purse and found amphetamines. Linda was then charged with possession and was freed on a $2,500 bond. The press jumped all over the story.
And I went down faster than the Titanic. I was on the front page of everything. New York Times, LA Times, London Times. This was just a great finale for everybody who'd been looking for something to get on me.
The Connecticut judge dismissed the possession charge against Linda after she agreed to enroll in an accelerated drug rehabilitation program. Linda was then extradited to Jacksonville, Florida, to face the conspiracy charge. 1 year later, Linda's original felony charge was reduced to conspiracy to possess, which was a misdemeanor. Blair pleaded guilty. Linda was sentenced to 3 years of probation, fined $5,000, and ordered to make 4 anti-drug commercials.
And for me, it was just the arrest ruined my career, absolutely brought it to a halt. Hollywood didn't want anything to do with me.
Even Linda's agents abandoned her.
They did call me and say, it might be best if you have other representation because we are so busy, we can barely answer our phone, let alone figure out how to get over this time period.
Friend Diane Murphy.
People didn't move past that. Unfortunately, it definitely took a toll.
Linda Blair spent the next 3 years starring in forgettable films, such as Hell Night. In 1982, 23-year-old Linda returned to the headlines when she appeared nude in a photo spread in We magazine. In the interview that accompanied the pictures, Linda mentioned how much she loved the funk music of singer Rick James. James read the article and gave Linda a call.
I thought he was great. He called me and he said, do you want to come to New York? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Rick James. So I went.
Blair and James hit it off.
I would say it was sort of like being around Elvis Presley. It was more of a party atmosphere, lots of people.
At a party at the home of Studio 54 owner Mark Fleischman, Blair and James were photographed in a provocative pose. One of the pictures was published in Rolling Stone magazine. The racy photo seemed to support the rumor that Linda and Rick were involved in a passionate affair.
I don't feel that our relationship was as romantic as the rest of the world probably interpreted. It was more friendship.
As Linda's 24th birthday approached, Linda's life was at a crossroad. With no decent acting roles coming her way, Blair continued to take jobs in B-movies. Friend Shelley Burmeister.
She did go into a direction into the B films. She had to eat, and she did just that. She took care of her family, her mother, and certainly took care of her horses. She had to pay the bills.
When the E! True Hollywood story continues, Linda hits bottom, professionally and personally.
And it was a time in my life when I didn't look, very good. It was that heavy scene. I was so subjected in the press to such ridicule.
The girls invade Bridget's hometown for some down-home fun. The Girls Next Door. All new Sunday at 10 on E!
This Sunday, E's True Murder Marathon takes you inside the real stories behind some of today's most infamous crimes. Then at 8, the premiere of the shocking true Hollywood story of Andrea Yates.
She was hearing voices telling her to hurt the children.
The True Murder Marathon, all day Sunday on E!
Now, you don't have to steal his razor. Introducing Schick Quattro for women. As advanced as a man's razor, but designed for you, with 4 thin blades and a sleek metal handle. The new Schick Quattro for women.
Who says there's no alternative to aging? At Avon, there is. Introducing a new alternative intensive age treatment, our breakthrough in herbaceutical science. For the first time, our exclusive healing plant therapies and revolutionary anti-aging science unite. Watch it reduce the look of wrinkles, visibly fade age spots, and help restore the look of youthful contours. So call your Avon lady and order a new alternative, our most intensive age treatment yet. Let the healing age begin.
How much?
$2 million. On November 23rd comes a story about the agony. Don't poke. And the pain.
That had to hurt. Yeah.
Of the most joyful time of the year.
It's Christmas. Everybody's nice on Christmas.
The Ice Harvest. Rated R.
I will only give my scoop to Kristen. Never call me on the bad phone.
Catch E! News weeknights at 7, 6 Central.
Juliana, I'm watching you.
My boss was a jerk. His boss was an even bigger jerk. Turns out I was working for a company of jerks. So I started my own consulting firm. Couldn't ask for a better boss.
With Assurance Health, you don't have to be part of a group to get health insurance. We've been covering independent spirits for more than 110 years.
Being a musician means not always getting a steady paycheck. Sometimes you have to fill in the gaps. Health benefits, I don't think so.
Call Assurance Health now at 1-800-854-1322, and we'll work with you to find a plan that suits your lifestyle.
I was a victim of downsizing. Me, the family. But if it hadn't happened, I would never have opened up the store.
If you need health insurance, call Assurance Health at 1-800-854-1322 and see how beautifully our plans can work with yours.
In 1979, Linda Blair pled guilty to possession of cocaine. 2 years later, her probation ended, and Linda put her legal problems behind her. But the 24-year-old actress found it difficult to repair her reputation, and her career suffered.
She was young and she was impressionable. You know, she's so trusting, so she trusted so many people that turned on her.
Unable to land parts in high-quality films, Linda starred in a succession of B movies to make ends meet.
Linda made a number of other movies, which I didn't think was in her best interest.
Filmmakers were interested in one thing: making money off Linda's name. Wardrobe stylist Claudia Wick.
It was really about what they could get from her, and she was young and she was impressionable, and she trusted so many people that turned on her, didn't help her, you know. I mean, it was stark.
Linda continued to search for a comeback role. In 1984, she thought she found it. Friend Murray Langston, best known as the unknown comic from 1970's Gong Show, offered Linda a role in the slapstick comedy Night Patrol. When Night Patrol debuted in 1985, 25-year-old Linda and the rest of the world knew it was a flop. Critics wrote about how much weight Linda had gained, and her self-esteem crumbled.
And it was a time in my life when I didn't look, you know, very good. It was that heavy scene. I mean, that to me is a very difficult time in my life because I was so subjected in the press to such ridicule.
The stress of her career and the problems with her weight were not the only issues plaguing Linda Blair. After 12 years, she could not shake the image of the exorcist.
People were like, "Hey, Linda Blair, spin your head around. You know, throw up pea soup, whatever." And I couldn't find any humor in it.
That is until 1990, when director and friend Bob Logan offered Linda a part in his new film, Repossessed. The movie was a spoof, on The Exorcist.
He came to me and he's like, you know, why don't you spoof The Exorcist? You're really funny and people don't know that.
But a good script and the addition of funny man Leslie Nielsen sealed the deal for Linda.
It's the best thing I could have done. Repossessed gave me the ability to, I believe, face what bothers you.
When she took on Repossessed, I think that she had high hopes that she could eliminate some of The Exorcist, make it lighten it up.
But the strategy didn't work. Repossessed died at the box office. After the release of Repossessed, Linda was disappointed but undaunted. Linda pressed forward. Then, in 1992, she received devastating news.
My mother told me that she had cancer. So I was driving along, and I'm in a state of shock.
Linda continued working, but frequently returned to Connecticut to check on her mom.
We were taking Mom in for tests, and they said, you know, Eleanor, you need to stay in the hospital. Something's terribly wrong.
Eleanor's sickness brought her children back together.
Her brother Jimmy and Debbie did come together while her mother was dying of cancer. I don't know that it resolved some of the feelings that's there in any sibling family, but it was a time where they did connect.
By 1994, 2 years after Eleanor was diagnosed, the Blair kids were accustomed to caring for their mother. One evening, Linda wasn't feeling well, and she decided to stay home instead of going to the hospital.
I was talking to my friend Shelley Burmeister on the telephone, and when we hung up, my brother called and said, Mom died.
It was a tough thing for her to lose her mother in the first place, because they'd been very close entirely throughout the industry, all of her experiences. And her mother, you know, was the guiding light behind her whole career.
When the E! True Hollywood story continues, Linda faces another challenge.
She said, they've offered me this role, and oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this.
After the death of her mother and a disappointing string of box office flops, 37-year-old Linda Blair once again attempted to redefine her career and her life.
You know, she was petrified.
In 1996, Linda landed the part of Rizzo in the timeless hit musical Grease.
She said, they've offered me this role, and oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this.
Night after night, I just sit there and go, wow, I'm in a Broadway musical.
Friend Marcia Teisling.
She had such a great time doing it. To be a part of Broadway was huge, is huge, for anyone.
Unfortunately, Linda was in for another professional disappointment.
They said that we release you from your contract because we're fine now financially and we don't need you.
Linda was down, but not out. She went back on the audition circuit, but every time her name was mentioned, people thought of the little girl from The Exorcist.
If you hang with Linda, you don't know she's Linda Blair until somebody else, you go someplace and it's pointed out to you on a daily basis. You know, people freak out over her. It's whacked.
Linda Blair found one way to use her Exorcist fame in a positive manner. She lent her name to promote causes dear to her heart, including people for the ethical treatment of animals and Save the Whales.
I'll call her up and say, hey, there's a charity event for leukemia or autism for children, and she'll fly right in and she'll jump on a horse and maybe practice for 5 minutes and compete.
Linda Blair has found a new starring role with her causes and charities. And although she may always live in the shadow of The Exorcist, it would be a mistake to count her out.
I can't tell you how many times I saw her hit that top gate and just eat it and get up and brush herself off and get back on the horse again.
I like entertaining people. I like my work, and I think that's really important. I hope that there's a bright future ahead.